So I'm 9 years old, and my family takes us over to my grandparents' house for a visit. I'm in the backyard playing with 3 close friends that I have from that neighborhood. And I get this call from the kitchen window from my grandmother and my mother. And they're yelling out to me to come into the house because they need some help. I need to do chores. And I immediately give them yep, I'll be right in, and then turn around and proceed to continue to hang out with my friends. Then the back door opens up abruptly, and out comes my father marching towards me. And I certainly didn't expect this. But he kicked me right in my ass, hard. And then he said, "Get in the house, you lazy fat ass." And my 3 friends stood there in absolute shock. They were speechless. I was too. But inside, I felt something really stirring, and it was coming up. It was seething. And I pushed it right back down, and I closed that door. You see, I was never going to let something like that ever happen to me again. And for 30 years, I didn't. And what it cost me was everything. You see, my father wasn't a bad person. He was a good man. He was a great man. He didn't invent rage. He inherited it. And once I learned where that came from, my perception and understanding of anger changed completely. Hi, I'm Bernie Tiger, and I have spent over 3 decades working with over 1,000 men who have been struggling with exactly what I just shared right now and sitting across from them to work with them. You see, my father grew up having a very hard life. Both of his parents were alcoholic. His father was an angry, abusive alcoholic, physically, verbally, emotionally, not only to my father, but to his wife, my father's mother. Now, my father's mother just basically sat and listened to everything. She really never had any interaction at all. So my father grew up very early on learning he had to fight for everything, that life really was not fair, and also that anything he wanted to do was going to be done because of his hard work and just getting down to the bare knuckles. By the time he was old enough to leave the house, at 18, he joined the military, where he became a mechanic for helicopters in the Army. And after that, he joined the police academy because he wanted to be a police officer. And while at the academy, he met a friend of his, and it turned out that the 2 of them were dating sisters, my mother and my aunt. And my father obviously was dating my mother, and this person was dating my aunt, and they both married. So he became my uncle, my father's brother-in-law, and of course my father married my mother. Now, my uncle was an extremely abusive alcoholic himself. He was vengeful, spiteful. He was a bad man, really. At the end of the day, he was a bad man. And my father, who had worked for everything so hard to do things, he scraped money together to get this convertible. And I remember seeing the picture of it. And he went to the junkyard and he had some friend help him with getting these old leather seats. And he put them together and he refurbished them to put them into this car. And it was a pride and joy, even though it was just this older car. For him, it was everything because it was his sweat and blood into it. Now, my uncle was a very spiteful person and very, very full of envy and jealousy. One night, in some drunken stupor, he comes over to the house and he cuts up my father's seats with a knife. Cuts up a pretty significant amount of them. My father gets up the next morning and looks at what happened to his car. He knew immediately who this was. He gets in his car and heads over to my uncle's house. Anger is really an understatement. This is full rage to what I remember from the story from my mother. Full on rage. And my father is a military and he's also a police officer. So guess what? He carries a weapon and he's on his way to my uncle's house for one intention only. He really wanted to shoot and kill my uncle. Now he gets to the house and he knew in his heart he was never going to actually go through with this, but he wanted to. And I think he needed to go through that process of making those inroads by driving there and physically doing this, even though he turned around and drove back home. but it was the actual actions and behaviors that helped him try to, I guess, to come to terms with that anger. And, there was a lot that happened after that. But at the end of the day, right now, is he didn't kill my uncle, but the anger and the rage was so significant with him. So he struggled. And this was such a challenge for my father because he never learned where, who, what, how to do with this rage and anger. He just took everything personal because everything was such a struggle for him. And more likely, my grandfather's rage was learned by his father, my great-grandfather, and so on. And this is a generational gap that holds together this word we're using here, rage, anger and rage, right? That holds all of it together. It just keeps being pushed forward and pushed forward. So again, my father really, he was not a bad man. He was a great man. And he did not know how to handle this rage and this anger that he was dealing with. And all he could do was just react the best that he could do. When he did that, when he kicked me in my ass, it was the first and only time that he actually did something like that. Now, I was physically disciplined, certainly, growing up. And I came from an era where that was a commonplace, too, as well. Him being a good person, he only knew how to do what he could do to the best of his ability. And he was reactive as a result of his really traumatized and horrible life growing up. And when he came out and did that to me, I know his intention wasn't to necessarily to be hateful, because he loved his family and he was a great man. But he was certainly angry, and whatever was going on with him at that time. And I learned shortly after this that he had just understood that he had an illness and something was going on. And it wasn't diagnosed yet, but he knew something internally was happening to him in his life. So I think a lot of the rage was also vented as a result of some of his own physical health concerns. So when he did this to me, I know it wasn't out of hatred. It was out of of anger, because I didn't react as quickly as I should have. I didn't do what I was supposed to do in his eyes, in a sense. So that's why he did that. But for me, that anger that sat with me, I carried that boy for some time because that sat with me. So when I reference 30 years that I would never let that come out again, that was me holding anger for myself. Throughout all of that, my issues with anger were just to be pented and kept inside, because I was dealing with the trauma that he obviously paid forward to as well. And some of mine was also exhibited in my early drinking. I would drink alcohol as a tool to help to digest that anger and that explosiveness that sat inside of me, that rage that was passed forward to me. So I was recently working with a man who's 54. This is about 2 months ago. And he had almost identical story. Obviously, the circumstances were different, but he had almost an identical story where his father was abusive to him because the father was also abused by his father. And it was like, it's almost insidious that it's so generational. It was paid forward. And he didn't know how to deal with it, and he was dealing with it with his kids, and he didn't know how to really handle this with his kids. And we worked together for a while on how to help him understand his reactiveness, to stop being responsive to things that happen, to step back for a moment and not to react to those situations, to understand them first, and then to formulate, how would I best respond to this situation, right? And that moment forward, he would be able to have control over how he would deal with his anger. And also a big part of this too, and I'll talk about this in a little bit later on in this video, is part of the tool in doing this is that you have to have that honest communication. And it's okay to have that, because that's how we begin the healing process. So let me continue my story. So as my father had dealt with that anger issue with me, certainly with my uncle, and for me, my alcohol use was really the way I handled my rage and my anger. So now we go to the next stage of the story. So let's move forward a few years. Now my son is 5 years old. We're living in New England, and it's Christmas. And all through the Christmas season, he wanted this Nintendo 64 game. It was a rage for a few years, and he was finally at that age where he wanted to get one for himself for Christmas, and he wanted it so bad. And of course, my wife and I, we got this, I had to search for it, and I was able to get it. And we had it all boxed up and wrapped up in bows. And the next morning, Christmas morning, he opens it up and he's so excited. And here's this game. And he's like, Dad, can you put it together for me? So, and I, at that time, I've been dealing with electronics and I've been building computers now for some time. So I was very acclimated on what to do with electronics and how to set this thing up. Well, while I was, frustration started because I realized that I wasn't able to get this thing to work on the old school TVs because they weren't developed like these smart TVs are today. And it needed an adapter, and the box did not indicate it. The salesperson no one ever indicated to me whatsoever that said, hey, by the way, you're going to need this $15 adapter in order for this to work on that particular CRT TV style. And I did not know that. And here we are Christmas morning, and I'm really starting to seethe again with anger because I was so frustrated that I couldn't get this to work. He was waiting for this whole season, and here it is, and it's in the system, and it's on the table, and it's ready to go, and I can't get the fucking thing to work. Excuse me for being so abrupt, but that's how I felt at that time. It was horrific. So instead of having any outbursts with this, I'm watching him on the couch, and he starts to cry. My son is starting to cry, and he was crying out of just sadness that he couldn't play this game. And what I did is I went over and I sat next to him, and I joined him crying. And I wasn't crying for him. I was crying because of the situation, but because he felt so hurt. And I felt in some ways that maybe I let him down. So it was a mutual love and connection for the two of us, but it was my way of handling anger, was to have that absolute heart-to-heart emotional connection with my son, and not have this pent-up anger and throwing things or yelling or screaming. It was about, I can't fix this right now, Mike, but I can promise you this. The next morning, I'm going to be the first guy in line at the store, and I'll get that part, and I'll come right back here, and we'll put this together, and you'll get to play your games. And that's exactly what I did. But for that day, that Christmas day, and I remember it was very memorable for me and my wife because there was a lot of emotions that went into that. But there's also a lot of learning for my son too as well, that sometimes things don't always work out the best way that we think they're going to work out. And it was a great learning step for him as much as it was for myself. So the gentleman I'm talking about that I've worked with for all of these over 3 decades, that I've helped with these exact same situations, it doesn't matter if your child is 8 or 18 or 38. If you've had issues with anger because it's been something you inherited in your journey, and you're tired of paying this forward and you want to stop this cycle, again, doesn't matter where they are on that age bracket and how much you are into that journey. So in other words, if they're 18 or even 38 years old, you've had a life already with them, and maybe these anger and explosiveness was part of that relationship growing up, and you can't go backwards in time, of course not. But what you can do is work with what you have in the present. And what I worked with many men over the years was that the first step in this is first to identify and understand exactly what this was that you had in you, because you have to call it out. You need to call this out by name. You have to say, I have this inherited anger that came to me, generational, from my father, from my family, as it probably was for his family. And I want to stop the cycle now. This is what I'm going to encourage you to say out loud. I have this anger and rage. It was inherited. I inherited it, didn't want it, but I can stop it now, and I can stop the cycle. And the very first thing you can do in order to help you with this process is to absolutely take the time to have communication with your loved one. Have communication with your children. Open up and be honest about, again, if your children are a little older and they've gone through some of your multiple anger experiences, you're going to have that heart to heart, and it's going to take some time. You're not going to do this in one day. This is going to be a process. But every time you sit down to re-examine what happened and what your intentions were. I didn't want to be angry and hurt you. I didn't want you to do X, Y, and Z because I wanted you to be a better person. I didn't want you to get hurt. Whatever the reasons were in that reactiveness that created that anger or rage at that moment, you can explain what the intentions were behind it, and then the pent-up frustrations that you had as a result that you did not know how to handle this. You did not know even how to remotely identify it, let alone handle it. And as a result of learning how to do this, first to call it out by name, anger and rage that you inherited, and then saying, I stop the cycle now. You know, my child is 5 years old. I got a great shot in stopping this right now. He's 15. I'm going to have some conversations with him and sit down and change how I respond now. He's 35. I need to have this conversation about our past and then to help explain this, regardless of where he's at in his journey, because he may have complete forgiveness. But it's more important for you as a person to be able to heal from this, to be able to share that I was like this because of this reason. And I wanted you to know I don't want you to inherit that, and I want you to be able to do this for your children to be able to stop this cycle as well and going forward. So this is the important part of what this whole entire video is about, the takeaway. If you're 50 and older and you're struggling with these many challenges that you've had in your life, right? We've all had. You have an opportunity today to reset, to stop the cycle and reset by first identifying and then coming to terms by having that communication with your loved ones. And this could also include your spouse, by the way. This isn't just for children alone. This is also for your spouse. But I'm really referring to paying stuff forward and stopping that cycle right now. So again, my name is Bernie Tiger. If you found any value in this, please consider subscribing to our channel. I have in the description below a link to a group of like-minded people like us, men 50 and older, who have had multiple experiences, and it's a community called the Tiger's Den. And in that Tiger's Den, it is an opportunity for us to work together and have the opportunity to connect and work through many of the issues that we all faced growing up. And again, if you're 50 and older, you certainly understand that we came from a generation that had a different perspective on how we did things. And some of that was good and healthy, and some of it was very unhealthy. And here's an opportunity for us to work with both. Share the healthy stuff and also work on the stuff that wasn't healthy. So this is Silver Warrior's Journey. This channel is for men 50 and older who have struggled through life and have had challenges, but have also had a lot of success, who are looking to share their experiences with each other and with people in their lives. And this is what this channel is primarily for. If you're here in this far in the video, you are a Silver Warrior, and this is your journey, and I'm blessed and fortunate to be part of that journey with you. I'll look forward to speaking with you, and I'll see you in the next video.